Hey everyone, today I'm very, very excited to be joined by Bernie Borges. Bernie, first of all, thank you very much for joining Spotlight.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
Fantastic. Bernie is the Vice President of Global Content Marketing for iCore, and Bernie is based in Florida. So hopefully, Bernie, it's sunny for you right now. And I'd just love for you to give us a bit of an introduction of yourself, but also love to learn a little bit more about iCore as well.
Sure. So as you said, I am based in Florida. I'm originally from New York City by way of California, meaning I grew up in New York, went out to California for 10 years, and moved to Florida 29 years ago. My career spans technology sales, spent about 10 years in software sales. And then kind of by accident, I fell into a marketing role. It really was unplanned, but I never looked back. I stayed in marketing once I got into a marketing role, ran marketing for a software company back in the late 90s, and then started my own marketing agency, content marketing agency in the early 2000s. Ran that for 15 years, merged it with a few others, and became a co-founder in a digital sales training company. And then a little while ago, this year, June of this year, exited that company and joined iCore as vice president of global content marketing. iCore is a global provider of outsourced customer services. So we work with brands and basically deliver their customer service to their end customers around the world.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I'm going to add it in now as well. We've also learned that Bernie has done, well, I was trying to add up the numbers, Bernie, but it's well over 300, 400 podcasts yourself that you've hosted.
That is correct. Across 3 different podcast shows, I've done well over 300 episodes. Correct.
Yeah, fantastic. So I really encourage people to have a look at Bernie's podcast as well. And we are going to touch on that, Bernie, during this discussion, because there's a lot of leaders out there who are keen to sort of share their message, share their story, talk to people who really want to share content as well. And we would love some hot tips from you. And I'm going to be one of them as we go through straight spotlight sessions. So, mate, thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to kick off with a very typical leadership question, and I'm going to start with challenges that you think that we're facing today. And the last couple of years has been, insane on accelerating a lot of the thinking, accelerating a lot of the challenges of what we're all facing inside the workforce. And so I'd love for you to share with us, what do you think some of the challenges that business leaders are facing today that are really hitting hard on how they actually lead and run their companies?
Yeah, Martin, I think the way that I would really characterize some of the greatest challenges that leaders are facing today is having to run a business that's focused on, business outcomes, which most of us want to continue to grow, even in pandemic times. And that may or may not be possible depending on a particular business, but while also managing the people side of the business. And while that's always been a factor in business, it's just been really accentuated in the last, say, 18 months due to the pandemic. So just having more compassion for people and more flexibility for people, and also just in some cases, throwing the book out the window on the game plan and coming up with a whole new game plan. So when you bring all that together, that's a challenging thing for leaders to really embrace. Is got to run the business, still want to make our numbers, got to make sure, that our people are happy and they're dealing with in most cases, additional stress in their life. And then, did what worked last week, last month, last quarter, last year, does that still work for us? And in a lot of cases, the answer is no. We have to come up with new strategies and plans. So it's a pretty monumental challenge.
I love that. I love what you said about balancing the people side of it with what we have to do as a business, and to be compassionate. I love that word, compassionate. So, then let me get personal for a second. How has your style changed over the past couple of years? What are some of the changes that you've gone through as a leader that you've felt and shared with others inside the workforce?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because it's something that I actually do want to share, because it's sort of a confession that I have to make, Martin. And that is that, in the past, I have been known to be a little bit direct and kind of fast on things that I want to get done. And I've just learned to slow down a little bit and just take a little time to talk to people at a human level
Mm.
and get to know them, know what their passions are, know what their struggles are, you know. And so it's been a wake up call for me. And I don't think I'm alone in this,
Yeah, yeah,
right? But it's been a wake up call for me to just slow down a little bit and just give people a chance to talk
yeah,
and just get to know each other a little bit. And, and just the word compassion comes back into, this part of our conversation. Just show more compassion, show people that you genuinely care. And, and I do it from a genuine place in my heart, not from an act, and I think if we're doing that genuinely, authentically, people know that,
yeah.
and they appreciate that a whole lot.
Yeah, I love that. Can we talk a bit about at stratapp well, it's not we talk about it actually. It's a hot topic around how the pandemic world has increased the number of meetings we've had. One, right? And then secondly, are we truly getting the quality about the multiplier of these meetings? Because it tends to be the same people talking. The agendas are very rigid and very probably fragmented and not necessarily really solid agendas. So are we actually being compassionate enough on people in relation to, are we asking the right questions about how are they? Are they getting what they need? Do they feel connected in a way that they can add value to themselves and to their business? Right. And these areas. So I'm going to run with the theme compassionate right now. If you're so let's think about sharing some advice to leaders, right, of how to set up a winning team and let's call it a distributed and remote workforce, which in every aspect of the globe, we're still somewhat distributed and remote. What's some of the advice to your team? But I'm going to stick with the compassionate thing. What are some of the things you would put in place today to be more compassionate with the teams in a more of a remote workforce?
So first, I would start with demonstrating a concerted effort to put together a diverse team.
Mm-hmm.
So that we all don't look alike and sound alike and have the same backgrounds and all of that. So a diverse team. And you and I are talking, you're in Australia, I'm in Florida in the US.
Yeah.
So that diversity is not limited to our backgrounds, but our location as well. And just bringing in the people that just have the right skill set and the right attitude and the mindset, right? So it's not just about the skills. Skills are important, of course, but the right mindset. We're anchored and aligned on the values. We share common values in terms of the things we want to get done, the business that we're in, the outcomes that we want to achieve, that sort of thing. And then just the compassionate side, the people side, that these are people that actually want to work with people just like them. I love what one leader said. We only want kind people on our team.
Mm.
And I love that. Just showing kindness, showing compassionate, right? And then I would also add just never losing sight of that human side. So whatever the business meeting is, maybe put in a policy, or whether you call it a policy or not, maybe it's more of a culture thing where you say, hey, we're going to take the first 5 minutes of the meeting, 3 minutes, whatever. And we're going to start out with a fun story. Tell us something fun that, happened in your life in the last, month or day or whatever, right? Just to have a little bit of levity. And, a lot of people, and I've been one of them, would say, hey, we're here to conduct business. We don't have time for that. We've got a lot to get done.
Yeah.
But the reality is we need our people to be on board, and we want them to be engaged, and we want them to actually enjoy being part of our company and part of that winning team that you described, Martin. So, you've got to, and let's face it, when we sat in a room and we all sat in a conference room or just in an office together, we horsed around anyway a little bit, right? I mean, we had those conversations anyway, whether we're talking about a game or an event or a movie or whatever the case may be, that happened. But when you're meeting 4, 5, 10, 15 people on a Zoom call, you tend not to do that unless the leader sets the stage for that and develops a culture for that. So that's my advice on setting up a winning distributed remote team.
Yeah, I love that. And because because my past was very much leadership in person. And I said to a really great leader back in 2013, it was, and I said, how could he was the most phenomenal people leader I've ever seen in my life. Right? Not just people, he was a business leader and he had everything. But I said to him, how do you lead when you're not in the room? Because the energy off you is incredible. And people will feed off that, but how do you actually lead when you're not in the room? And he couldn't answer the question. It was quite an amazing thing. And I saw him get vulnerable for the first time ever that I'd known this individual for 10 years. And sort of one of the best parts that I love is at the moment, I'm spending a lot of time with CEOs around the world. And I had a CEO and he sort of said to me, Martin, I've got these young kids coming into my business, but I haven't even met them yet. How do I give them a voice? And I thought the fact that he was asking the question was awesome. Because a lot of people would just go give the task and go do and get a delivery. He wasn't asking that. He goes, I want them to have a voice. I want them to be heard. How do we do it? And we came together and we've done it with him. And they're all around different 5, 6, 7 locations around the world. So I love the idea of what you're saying, but I also agree that it's leadership led.
Yeah.
Right. The leader needs to set the tone, which is fantastic. Hey, well, just before I get into podcasting, because I really want to get there, because I want to learn everything you have to talk about this topic on the podcasting side. Is there any other advice that you would have for leaders out there today who are still trying to deal with this fragmentation of the pandemic that it's created, whether it's putting internal pressures, external pressures? Is there any other advice that you would give them from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things come to mind, Martin. One is if you're not already having skip level meetings within your company, depends on the size of your company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But across the organization, depending on how many layers of management you have, institute more skip level meetings
Mm-hmm.
and give people that opportunity to talk to a higher level within the organization, and start out the meeting just giving the employee a chance to get to know the skip level manager and vice versa,
Yep.
and just let them have a normal human conversation. Sure, they can talk about the employee's work and the company and that sort of thing, and that's all great, but start out just at the human level and do the skip level thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, with your own team, have a dedicated meeting that's all around dreamstorming. You know
Yeah.
what brainstorming is, right?
Yeah.
Dreamstorming. Like, hey, what are your dreams? What do you want to accomplish in your life, whether it's related to your profession, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a dream of a profession you want to be in somewhere in the future and you're not there right now. And that's okay to talk about that. Like, you don't have to hold that in, hold that back. What's your dream?
Yep.
And just start those conversations and let people just talk, and you'd be amazed at what you learn about people, and they will appreciate that so much, especially if you start showing your support for them and
Mm.
reinforcing that in upcoming conversations. Like, hey, I know you want to be a championship surfer out there, in Australia. I want to help you get there, whatever that dream is.
Yeah.
So dreamstorming.
Dreamstorming. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm absolutely going to use it. I'm just going to take a break. I just need a sip of water.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, I just saw that cup. What is that cup, by the way?
So I was on a podcast a while ago, and they sent me this cup.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's very cool. Are they the 3 guys doing the podcast?
Well, it's two guys and me in the middle. I'm the one in the middle.
How good is that? How good? I'm going to apologize up front. You might get a T-shirt.
T-shirt works, except the shipping cost might be exorbitant. You don't have to.
Yes, exactly right. So let's talk about podcasting. You're very experienced. I think we're up to spotlight number 11 or number 12. You've done over 300. So first of all, why did you get into it?
So the why part, Martin, on why I got into podcasting. First of all, my first podcast was about 10 years ago, and it was an experiment. It was fairly early days in podcasting. And, you know, Buddy and I just decided, hey, let's do this thing. And we just kind of bantered back and forth on digital marketing topics. And we didn't really have a strategy. It was really just for fun and just kind of get our names out there. And we did 49 episodes. And then I didn't do one for about a year or so. And then I started the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. And I went into that one with a strategy. And the strategy, Martin, was to, just like you're doing, interview people, but specifically marketers. Again, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, right?
Yep.
Interview marketers on what they're doing in their modern marketing strategy or about their modern marketing journey. And across 200, I did 300 episodes, but episode 300 was my solo episode where I retired it. So I had 299 interviews.
Yeah, wow.
And, you know, the why behind that was for relationship building. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. Like now, you know, I've been introduced to you and your company stratapp, and, you know, I want to learn more about that. And I want to stay in touch with you. And just from one podcast conversation, you can build a relationship. That starts a relationship that you can build on. Not to mention, you can learn a whole lot. I interviewed 299 marketers.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's the why. That's the why.
So, well, let's, because, you know what, I'm a co-founder in a business. One way that we wanted to share our story, our message, was not necessarily through always our voice. It was through the voice of these sessions, these spotlight sessions, right? So, and we've learned a lot over the episodes that we've done, but we've got so much more to do. I also know there's a lot of people out there who would love to do something similar. So can you share with us just how to get started?
So on the how to get started, Martin, I always recommend starting out by assuming you're doing an interview style podcast, which is what you're doing, right? Because some podcasts that you have like two people inside the company and they're the hosts and they don't interview people and they're just talking about a topic. And that can work if you got two people who can, you know, once a week or whatever consistency, you know, they've got a topic that's interesting and relevant and they're good personalities, that can work. But when you're doing the interview style, start out with people that you know, start out with existing clients, existing relationships you have, and just invite them to come on and be featured on the podcast. Notice I'm emphasizing the word feature, like you want to feature them, give them a platform to discuss a topic that they're passionate about, that they have some expertise on, and you're giving them that opportunity to, again, be featured. So to get it started, start out with, you know, write down a list of 10, 20, 30, 50 people that you know, and they're going to say yes when you contact them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you've got your first 10, 20, 30, 50, whatever the number is, you know, sort of out the door because you've interviewed people that you know. And then you've got social proof because as you put them on your website and, you know, you're sharing the content, then when you reach out to someone you don't know, especially if it's someone that has significant credentials and, you know, might be, you know, maybe a little bit difficult to get a yes from them. When you've got the social proof, it's a little less difficult, right? You're more apt. And I was able to get some, you know, well-known.
So who was your most prominent feature?
I'd say the most prominent was the CEO of Workfront. So I reached out to the CMO of Workfront, and she said, you know, I appreciate the invitation, but I'd like for you to actually interview our CEO.
Yeah, right.
And Workfront is a cool company. They were acquired by Adobe. I don't know, about 6 months ago, give or take. And you know, we talked about the state of modern work. You know, and it was a great interview. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, fantastic. So did you always have, when you said the strategy or the plan, did you always have the topics like stepped out by episode? Was there a theme of the way that it's sequenced?
So what I didn't do, if I understand your question correctly, Martin, I didn't map out an editorial calendar to say I want to cover these topics over this span of time. I didn't do that. Instead, I targeted the people that I wanted to have on the podcast. and I targeted mostly B2B marketing executives.
Yep.
And then I invited them to talk about whatever was of interest to them. But here's how I did it. I did it on a prep call.
Yeah.
I would invite them first on a prep call, and I would
Mhm.
let them know that the prep call is exactly that. We're going to prepare for the actual recording. We're not doing the recording on that day.
Yeah.
And then I, I'll prepare for the prep call by checking out their content, their LinkedIn profile, etc., and try to have some ideas on topics that might be relevant and passionate about, that they're
Yeah.
passionate about. And sometimes that worked. Sometimes like, yep, that's exactly what I want to talk about. Other times it was more of a blank sheet of paper, and I would just
Yeah.
ask,
Cool.
what are you
Yeah.
working on?
Yeah.
What's been a successful strategy? What's something that, you feel really passionate about in marketing? And we always came up with at least one, sometimes more than one topic, but
Yeah.
we'd have to settle on one because, like you and I are doing, we'd want to keep it to approximately 30 or so minutes, give or take.
Yeah.
But that prep call was valuable for two reasons, Martin. Two reasons. One is it gave us the talking points for the podcast,
Mhm.
and it gave my guests the comfort level that they needed for the actual podcast recording. But it
Right.
also gave me more opportunity for relationship building. I was able to earn some respect on the fact that, we're preparing for this. They
Mhm.
appreciated that. Right. So then on the day of the recording, which was usually anywhere from 3 to 12 days later, maybe even, more than 12 days later, but usually I try to keep it 3 to 5 days later while it's fresh in their head. Plus
Mhm.
I share a document with them. Then it's fresh in their head. They know what we're going to talk about, and they're bought in, like they're aligned with me on the topic, and the interview goes great. It's conversational, and it just, went smoothly. So I have two conversations with them, which gives me that much more opportunity for relationship building.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, first of all, I'm enjoying relationship building with you. It's been cool. And so, just talk about. I'm thinking you answered the question, because when you talked about you had an audience list that you were going after, because we all have an audience list, and we would all love I don't know, Simon Sinek, for example, Gary Vee, these guys who are just phenomenally, profiled individuals. Were you able to, did you target any of those individuals, or did you actually was successful in getting any of those individuals
No,
in the
and that
marketing
was
space? Yeah.
it was I wanted practitioners in companies.
Yeah.
I there Here's the way I look at it, Martin. There are podcasts out there that feature those celebrities, the Simon
Mhm.
Sineks, the Gary V's of the world, right? Now, if Gary Vee had come to me and say, I want to be on your podcast, I would have, of course, said yes, but I didn't go after a Gary
Yeah.
Vee. I
Yeah.
went after the VPs and the CMOs in the trenches at brands. And by the way, in many cases, B2B brands that you would probably not even know. They're not,
Yeah.
we're not talking, Fortune 100 companies here, although there were a few of those,
Yes.
SAP, for example, as one example, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted people who were practitioners in the trenches, because that's who my audience is going to relate to. They're going to relate to Gary Vee in a different way, right? And they're going to hear Gary Vee on some other
Everywhere
podcast.
else.
On my
Yeah.
podcast, they're going to hear their peers in the trenches.
Yeah. So, how did you best market the podcast?
Mostly social media. I mean, we also had an email list, and we would invite people to subscribe, and we'd send them a weekly email that had, the most recent podcast episodes. But,
Yeah.
we'd atomize the content, we'd split it up, we'd do a little excerpts, that kind of thing. I think it's the kind of thing that you're doing as well. And then share it out on social, across the major social platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, that's mostly the way that we did it. I mean, another
Yeah.
way that we did it was I would also be a guest on other people's podcasts like this with you, even though the podcast I'm describing now is in the past, it's retired, although the content is still out there. Modern
Yeah.
Marketing Engine podcast is still out there, just not active. But, being a guest on other people's podcasts, you obviously get some additional exposure to that audience, and, that's another way to market the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the trend is of marketers doing it, which you would know more than me of these types of mediums, because I actually had he's actually a partner and a client, and he really intrigued me on his new way of thinking. And when I was talking to him one-to-one, I said, I've got to get this voice. I've got to give this voice a platform. And I did ask him, whether you call it cheekily or not, but I did ask him at the end, why, because he's using stratapp internally, why is stratapp of value to you and your company? He gave a 60-second clip. And that was the only question. We did not prep that question, by the way. I did throw it in because the themes were going that way. And he gave a 60-second clip we now use to share with executives around the world what today and what tomorrow would look like if you had technology straight out. And it wasn't designed that way. I wasn't really going after it in the session, in the podcast, but he gave a beautiful, succinct 60 seconds. You could not have scripted it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got lucky, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, you were spontaneous. I mentioned that I would do a prep call. And so we'd have talking points, not a script, but talking points.
Yeah.
But I always told my guest, Martin, I always said, look, I may ask you a question that we haven't previously planned. Number one, it's going to be within the context of the topic. Number two, we're doing a recording. If you don't like it, you can just say, hey, time out. I don't like that question, which I think it happened once in 299 episodes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So, but the spontaneity of that, like your 60-second clip, can be priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. But then it really is. And it's the voice of the people, the individual or the company that matters. It's your client. So it's that feature piece that you talked about. I didn't think of it as a feature. I just thought about, I want to get this person's voice out there because it's an incredible voice. The way that they think about their business, the way they think about external stakeholders and their internal stakeholders as well, which is very, very cool. So three pieces of advice doing really, really good podcasts. What would they be?
So number one, have a strategy, know what your game plan is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number two, which is kind of related to number one, but I'm still going to single it out as one of the three. And that is, know who the audience is that you want to reach. Know, what it is that they care about, so that when you get a temptation to deviate, which if you're going to do podcasting for a while, you might get that, you will get that temptation. So you can always, say, does that temptation align with my audience?
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, just, there's a workflow to podcasting, which you're experiencing, right? So document that workflow, build a process around it, build a team around it. For someone who's doing it all by themselves, it is overwhelming if you're doing it by yourself. It's best if you've got a team of 2 or 3 or 4 people. I don't mean full time. I mean, just people that you can delegate different aspects of the podcast production to, from the editing to the graphics to the social media to just all the different details. So have a team that you can workflow it all out and document a process.
So Bernie, thank you very much for joining us on Spotlight. We really did enjoy it. You are very unique for our audience, and you really hit 3 things very, very, I think perfectly. Your articulation of it was just exceptional. And the first one was about a compassionate leadership. But what I got out of that was your vulnerability of sharing you weren't always a compassionate leader, right? You learned it, you understood it, and then you changed, and now compassionate leadership is clearly in your DNA of how you lead your teams moving forward. The other one is dream storming, which I think you should hashtag and brand that. That's pretty cool, about getting the team just to dream. And it's not necessarily always internal, but what are their dreams? What are their bigger dreams that are outside the 4 walls of work as well? And the third one, when you talked about target audience, I thought about this because I've never spoken to people about podcasting before. But there's a lot of leaders who enjoy doing podcasts, a lot of leaders don't even get invited to do podcasts, right? But if there's leaders out there thinking to do it, you've given us some really good advice on how to get started and how to put a strategy in place. But I think it was the reason why you do it around connecting and relationship building, which to me is what this is all about. And we'll share that knowledge and insights with everyone. If we can just take one or two things, we've just made the world a better place.
Exactly.
So for that, any last comments before we part?
On the podcasting topic, to be consistent, like be committed. If you're going to do it, plan it, and then be consistent, and look at it as a long-term plan, like a minimum 1 year, bare minimum. That'd be my last piece of advice for today.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Bernie, thank you very much for joining us on Spotlight, and from the team at stratapp, thank you very much, mate.
Thanks for having me, Martin. I enjoyed our conversation.
Take care.